Hey folks, I just need to talk for a second. Or I guess I need to get a story off my chest. For this story, we have to go all the way back to 1999, when a 12-year-old Andrew met a 12-year-old Sophie at Urbana Middle School in Urbana, Illinois. We were in 6th grade together, and one spring afternoon at lunch, her group of friends came running over to my group of friends announcing that Sophie thought I was cute, and they proposed we be boyfriend and girlfriend. I was an easy sell. I mean, did you see that smile? We walked home from school together every day that spring, holding hands and sweating bullets. It was a sweet kinship, but we were mostly terrified of each other, and by the next fall, as we started the 7th grade, we had gone our separate directions. We mostly lived different lives through the rest of our junior high and high school years, but a couple heartstrings remained connected. That first spark never fully goes away, and she was always a sweet smile in the halls. Life kept us at arm's reach until the time was right. After I finished college and moved back to Urbana in 2012, Sophie and I started bumping into each other around town. At first it was accidental, but before long it was on purpose. I wasn't looking for anything other than myself coming back home to Urbana, but being around Sophie just felt as natural as breathing. Sophie and I were married on June 4th in 2016, surrounded by family and friends as we celebrated in some of our favorite corners of Urbana. We ran off to Steamboat Springs, Colorado to lose ourselves in the mountains for 10 days before coming home to begin our life together in the home that we had just bought a month earlier. On June 30th, 26 days after we got married, Sophie went to the hospital with an unusual headache and left with the diagnosis of a golf ball-sized tumor on the left side of her brain. A 3 by 5 centimeter oligodendroglioma that was occupying space near her premotor and motor cortex, the parts of the brain that control movement and speech, and thinking about movement and speaking. The tumor doesn't grow like a blunt object that can be plucked, but instead grows like a spiderweb and is made of actual brain tissue. I'm not a doctor, and everything you're hearing here is coming from a terrified meteorologist absorbing information in a doctor's office, but that isn't a fun diagnosis. When surgically operating in this sensitive area, you run the risk of muscle weakness and mobility issues, hopefully temporary, but potentially permanent. The diffuse nature of the tumor also means that even with surgery, the tumor can never be fully removed, and some cells will always remain, lurking and waiting to come back. Still, her surgery in August 2016 was quite successful. A large portion of the tumor was removed, and while she did have issues walking and talking afterward, through hard work, grit, and determination, I watched Sophie come back stronger than ever. A diagnosis like this will rearrange your priorities fast, and that's not all bad. We've lived hard over the last 5 years. We made our house a home, planted trees, started an ever-expanding garden, got a dog, and spent time on all forms of water bodies. Living with something like this isn't always easy. Sometimes you're living scan to scan, hoping to keep the good news rolling, and other times it's a little less prominent. Whew. Things got weird this year, though. Sophie had a seizure in January, which led us in for an MRI, which resulted in some uncomfortable news in March. A team of doctors specializing in neurology and neurosurgery had reviewed the scan and recommended further action. In June, 5 years after our wedding, 5 years after her first brain surgery, a second craniotomy was recommended. There was that nuke again. The tumor was growing slowly, so they let Sophie schedule the surgery for the first week in September so that we could enjoy our summer before crossing that threshold into the unknown. Lots of time on the water, time with family and friends, and quiet moments just for us. My own particular brand of anxiety thrives on uncertainty. Not being able to visualize the future ends up being paralyzing. I don't need to be a fortune teller, but if I don't know if my wife will be able to walk unassisted 2 weeks from today, then I'm not likely to start on that next project on my to-do list. What do you even do when you're 2 weeks out from that? Or a week out? I painted our front door, the kitchen cabinets, the back door, and touched up the porch. Sophie packed most of our belongings as we prepared for an indefinite, but hopefully a week or so long stay in Chicago. We went up to the city a week before the surgery for some pre-op appointments, and Sophie and I took the opportunity to scope out the neighborhood, find some favorite food, and retreated to some relaxing summer thunderstorms from the hotel at night. We traveled back to Chicago 2 days early for a COVID test and to get settled into the hotel that would be our home base for the next week or so. Sophie's father, Sean, met us there. He'd be my wingman once Sophie blasted off for the moon on Tuesday morning. We walked to the lakefront, stuffed our bellies, and on the final night, rather than sit and worry, Sophie's intuition led us to a sunset river tour of the city. The weather was unreal, clear skies and a warm breeze. It got dark, we went home, Sophie sat at her travel altar, and we just sat with it all. I tried my best to meditate and come up with a comforting mantra for my future self. The river was probably still on my mind because after a while I scribbled down, "Relax and let the help flow." Asking for help has never been easy for me. Shoot, I have a hard time accepting offered help. My chase partner Colin called me "never accept a helping hand, Drew" this spring as I declined help and fashioned all 4 of my bags to my body as we walked out of the hotel one morning. The next few weeks, maybe the next few months, would be hard. I knew that. But ever since we got worried that Sophie would need another surgery, this was the night I was waiting for. It wasn't dread. It was a reckless anxiety, like the day before a big trip. Tomorrow was the day we got that thing out of her head. Tomorrow was the day that her and these doctors would collaborate and Sophie 3.0 gets to begin rebuilding. I desperately wanted to get to the other side of this thing, and that was largely Sophie's vibe too. The next morning came early, a 3 a.m. alarm, Sophie's last call for water. At 5 o'clock, we left the hotel and walked down a hauntingly quiet Michigan Avenue toward Northwestern Hospital. It felt like we were on another planet. I walked Sophie to the 6th floor to check in, sat with her while she met her team, and then she was wheeled away from me shortly after 7:30. That moment hits hardest. I was ready though. I had made a plan. Walk to Do Right Donuts across the street, get a donut, get a coffee, and walk myself to the beach. We had planned to document much of this experience, but that day I definitely was just locked into my own head. I sat there and watched the hot, late summer sun come up over the lake, stuck my feet in the water, and cried a little. Again, not sad, fearful tears, but the slow beginnings of an emotional release several months in the making. I had my feet in the cold water with the hot sun on my back, and I looked at the city, a view I had just enjoyed with Sophie in the foreground a few days earlier, and thought about her up there working with her team. I documented nothing while I walked along the lake for hours before making my way back to the hotel, flopped on the bed across from Sean, who was doing his best to work on a lecture. I expected the operation to last into the early afternoon, but at 11 a.m. I received a text update. Closing incision has begun. That can't mean anything other than they're finishing up, can it? 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was the surgeon, and they had done it. A successful surgery with the majority of the tumor removed, and best of all, Sophie was talking just fine and still moving her foot. This meant that while there would be weakness as swelling set in, it was all fully expected to be temporary, and Sophie's prognosis was for a full recovery from the surgery. I was able to lay eyes on her at 1:30 that afternoon, and my jaw nearly hit the ground. She looked incredible. How could anyone look so good after undergoing a multi-hour awake craniotomy? The team of doctors and nurses that took care of Sophie was incredible. They were tender and nurturing to Sophie, who was in the first hours of her new 3.0 form and was a bit of a baby deer. Her toes were stubborn to move and her fingers took a little extra thinking, but her wit was still there, and the funniest person I've ever met was making me laugh right away. The team was kind enough to let me stay the night by her side for the 2 nights that she was in the hospital. That's right, only 2 nights. In 2016, Sophie spent 4 days in the ICU and a total of 10 days in the hospital before being discharged. This time, 24 hours after the operation, she walked herself from the ICU to her new room where she'd be discharged the next day. That night, I laid there in the little bedside cot and stared out the window at the quiet city streets, just feeling so damn grateful. We loaded into the car on the 9th of September and drove home to Urbana. And here we are, in the home we bought in 2016, resting and recharging for another burst of life. For now, Sophie will be Slofie, and everything will take a little longer. I'm incredibly blessed to have a job that lets me work flexibly from home so that I can be here to take care of her. You can get a lot about my current headspace from my most recent Sky Drama vlog, Constellation. Stay grounded in what you can control, in what you've got right in front of you. No matter what it is, a great storm chase, or a magical moment with a loved one, it's all fleeting, and it'll all be over before you know it. The ability to move her body, to dance and express herself and explore the outdoors is so precious to Sophie, and it inspires me every day to acknowledge how blessed I am to have had a body that has served me to this point. But for now, my Sophie, my best friend, is standing in the bathroom across the hall from me, brushing her teeth while watching crappy reality TV on her phone after an evening spent together in the woods, our first trip back since the surgery. Right now, life is good.